Hey everyone, thank you for joining us once again for another session of Open House. This is Edward Quintero from Mole3D, and today we are very proud and pleased to have with us Gio Napkil. Gio is an experienced 3D modeler who's been working in the visual effects and video game industries now for a while. Actually, Gio and I go way back. We used to, my first job in the industry was at ESC, where I first met Gio, and we also worked together for a little while at Industrial Light and Magic. So Gio's a great friend of Mole3D, and he also taught for us at the workshop, our first workshop that we had last year. So this has been a long time coming. We've been asking Gio for a long time to join us and teach for us. And finally now everything's come together. We have our online school, and Gio is here with us. So without further ado, Gio, thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
No, it's an honor to have you, man. So, yeah, I guess so. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about your background, your experience, and then we'll go into a demo and show the audience a little bit about what you're going to be teaching this semester.
Thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be participating in this webinar. Just to tell you guys a little bit about myself, I'm currently a character artist working at Oculus VR, where we're doing some very cool and exciting things. Prior to that, I was at Valve Software doing video game assets and a lot of design work associated with that. And prior to Valve, I was at ILM for about 12 or so years, I believe, verging on 13. And there, I worked on such films as War of the Worlds, Star Wars Episodes 2 and 3, Star Trek, and the last project I was involved in was The Avengers, where I supervised the character modeling aspect of the show and also got the chance to build and oversee the quality control for the Hulk. So I mean, it was an experience that for me was a dream come true. I mean, that may sound cliche, but I've always dreamt of working there since I was a kid. Um, so
So
yeah.
when I was there, I noticed that one of the things I envied about the modeling department and you guys is that there seemed to be a very tight knit group of like traditional sculpting practices that you guys were bringing into your modeling, and those
Mhm.
even like after hours, a lot of the modelers would go out and sculpt, and try to learn anatomy. Is that how much of an influence was that on you and in your work?
Well, that in itself was a very pivotal point for me. Having attended the the sculpting group. Just as a little background there, when I was there, and I believe that's still the case right now. I could be wrong, but back when I was there, ILM would have these free sculpting nights. I believe it was every Wednesday, where a bunch of us from it was open to all the departments, not just character modelers, but a bunch of us would gather and with supplies paid for by ILM, we sculpted essentially creatures from live models, and all that was taught by a gentleman by the name of Richard Miller, who used to be in the old school ILM model shop. So he worked on pretty much like Return of the Jedi, Ghostbusters. I mean, you name it. He was the de facto character sculptor back then, or one of them, I mean, I should say. So that little group, um, for me, it was very important because one, it exposed me to working with clay, which was something that I loved, and for the longest time it became a passion of mine to really push myself and get better at it. So, and also it was very important because that's where I had met my one of my mentors, Andrew Cause, of Anatomy Tools, and he pretty much taught me a lot. A lot of what I know, in terms of, you know, how to approach the figure, the human figure, how to approach, uh, you know, executing the work to the best of my abilities, the discipline. He ingrained a lot of that in me, and it was because of that sculpting group where I actually was able to to meet him and prove to him that you know I was someone worth his time in taking on to teach, I guess.
So I know that back in the day, way back when we started, in this industry, it was the software was a little different. We didn't have tools like ZBrush.
Mhm.
Now that technology has improved, how does that like experience of traditional sculpting? Can you actually bring that into the computer? Are you able to translate those skills?
I would say that with having gone through that experience of loving the feel of clay, learning from these masters of the clay medium. That for me, I'm a much better character artist because of it. And I just fully attribute that to being exposed to working with clay. I mean, it just does something to how you see the figure and the form in the round. I mean, as CG modelers, we're always looking at a flat screen. Maybe with ZBrush or Maya. We're working with something dimensional, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still on a flat screen. So working with clay, and I admit I haven't been doing it as much recently, but just the experience of touching something tangible and working out, trying to resolve the the form, with tension, with feedback, and seeing it from all angles. Being able to turn it around from a turntable. It's, in my opinion, every character artist should go through that experience. It totally is something that'll make you a much better digital modeler.
Yeah, and I would say that, you're kind of known for that. Like your 3D models have this really natural, organic feel to it that's kind of pretty rare these days. I think your stuff kind of just looks very, really real to me. It has like
Oh,
that sensibility that I could tell comes from that training that you've had. So let me ask you this, like, and I know that when we were designing this class with you, that's part of the goal was to teach that knowledge that you've learned from traditional sculpting and show the students how to translate that into 3D. So you mentioned you were going to show some of your artwork. Is there some like some pointers that you could give our audience, or just in general, just point out what or how you approach 3D models with that type of viewpoint, like with the traditional viewpoint?
just to kind of give a brief insight of what the class is going to be. It's not going to be like a how to use ZBrush class, but rather it's using ZBrush um, as a digital tool to help improve your, not just technique in using the software, but also your technique on how to look at the digital model in front of you in ZBrush and treat it like clay. And so that means making things a little bit harder, in terms of not really using a lot of the safety nets of the software. And we're going to get into that obviously as the class progresses, but it's just sort of like a brief background of how I approach things when I model, more for my personal work rather than sort of work, because obviously in the limits of production, uh, you're willingly taking advantage of all the shortcuts you can get from the software. But when I'm am I sharing this screen, by the way?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, we're good.
Okay. Okay. So when I'm working on something like this, these are built using, Symmetry, but a lot of times I would go through certain exercises. Oh, this is from Pirates of the Caribbean 2. Let me just look at um, a lot of times, like say this particular model, I would dedicate a night or 2 nights to work on something without the use of symmetry, for example. Um, I think this model, I started off with a ZBrush ball, one of the default balls that comes with ZBrush, and started pushing and pulling it till I got to this level, and uh, without the use of symmetry. And I would do that not just with busts, but also posed figures and sometimes full-blown dioramas, which I'll show in a bit. But my belief is that when you kind of do things like that using the software, you're exercising a lot of muscles that wouldn't normally be exercised if you are using sort of the safety nets of CG, such as symmetry or what have you. So a lot of these, I mean, these are mostly, I mean, this is sort of you know showing more of the symmetry tool, but a lot of them let me just open up ZBrush here. So for this particular model, I started off with a sphere and just started pulling this figure out of it. So it's a good exercise to do once in a while, just to keep things hard and keep myself on my toes. The every time I finish one of these models, I'm always exhausted, since I'm constantly, you know, tracking a lot of areas to make sure it's consistent with the other side. If it's symmetrical, in which case, it isn't in most cases. But you know, I'm 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 trying to be better at not having to rely on much safety nets, because you know once you do that, you become a little bit more, or a lot more, decisive with your choices when you're using your tools, so that when you are in an environment that is in a production style environment where you need to bust out something really quickly, you will be a lot quicker in that, because you've gone through something, or you're used to doing things the hard way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That makes sense?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So it's kind of like, I mean, this is how it would be approached traditionally anyway, right? You don't have the safety net of a symmetry brush, so it's
Yeah.
you're kind of keeping those skills going, right? That your eye trained for that type of scenario.
Yeah, and that's why I always look to the traditional sculptors as inspiration, because I mean, you know, talk about pressure on the job. Someone working in the model shop has to sculpt something non-symmetrically, and cast it and make sure there's a lot more involved. So as CG artists, I think we have it really really good in terms of again, these safety nets. And I always believe sometimes we really need to make things harder for ourselves. So a lot of what we're going to be dealing with in the class will be focused on that, but while still making it fun, obviously.
Have you ever gone as far as to not try to use Control Z?
Not quite.
Yeah, that's a little hardcore, right?
Yeah, or not saving. I mean,
Yeah.
that's I'm not quite that insane. So you know, so this was a model I did just recently. Uh, Decided to I mean, I'm seeing a lot of really cool 3D printed models out there on Facebook, and it just made me want to do uh, a posed figure. So I figured, hey, I have this dragon I was working on and a dragon rider, so I wanted to pose it to see how it could possibly look 3D printed. So that's sort of the intent of this piece, and also just to practice posing my models in a way that's presentable or in a way that could be uh, possibly sold as a product or used as a display on top of someone's desk. So I tried to incorporate a lot of thought in how I posed the figure, just in terms of where the eye leads to the sculpture. Using the tail, for example, if I turn the sculpture around, there's a certain flow that I was trying to do leading up to the head, and where the head is turning and how the figure, excuse me, and how the figure is perched beside the dragon, um, with her hand, caressing its neck, hopefully telling a story of their relationship together. So this was a really fun but tedious um, thing to do, since I wanted to individually sculpt the scales and design the bigger scales. So not that I have anything against using alpha maps, but again, it's just one of those things where I wanted to make things hard for myself, because after this dragon, if I model another dragon or another creature with scales, it'll be a cinch. And at that point, I may choose to use alpha maps or choose something easier. But I know that once I jump on that creature, it'll be a fun, easy time, because I've gone through the process of working on this. And this guy was hard. I mean, it took a lot of my patience to really get in there and you know
Wow.
graft all this in by hand right there.
I
So
can't believe you did that by hand. That's pretty incredible.
yeah, and that's something we'll touch on. Like just placement of detail in a way, hopefully in a way that complements the bigger forms. The reason why I wanted to do it by hand also was I wanted to be able to control how the scales kind of flowed from one form to the other versus using alpha maps, which I know you could do with certain options of the brush, but I guess I'm just a little bit too anal sometimes. So, but yeah, so let's open up a different. So this one was let me just upres him a little bit. He's he's a little on the high polygon side, so it's taking a little bit. So this guy was a fun one in terms of just having fun with forms. I just wanted to do a creature that heavily inspired by Wayne Barlow. Obviously, I mean when you look at this, and if you're familiar with Wayne Douglas Barlow's works, it's definitely taken from that style. But it was a perfect one for me to kind of just practice modeling forms that interact with each other, and you know detailing it out, not quite to the extent of the dragon, but just having fun. It's almost like the equivalent of when you're talking on the phone and you're doodling on a sticky pad, and you're just letting your hand wander around as you're talking to someone. It's like mindless kind of doodling. So this guy was pretty much that. And this particular one I'm still working on. It's the samurai diorama that I've been working on for the longest time. I believe at one point the file was corrupted, so I was able to open up recently with a faster computer, thankfully. But it's still very much a work in progress. But it's multiple figures. Again, everything sculpted with a sphere, just everything non-symmetrical. Just pulled all these figures from a ball. Um, So this guy is based on a Seven Samurai character played by Toshiro Mifune, who I'm a big fan of. So
It's pretty impressive.
thank you.
That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, still a while before I finish these things. I mean, there are these sort of uh, tinier, like smaller demon warriors um, shooting arrows at him. So yeah, what else do we have here? And I mean, that's essentially some of the newer ZBrush models I've been working on lately. Most of the time I've been busy with work, so
Man, these are awesome. Can't wait to see that samurai one 3D printed. That'd be
if there's
pretty
a
epic.
printer as big that can, I mean, it's meant to be huge. So I'll be impressed to see one printed at a scale that I'd be happy with.
So how do you feel about, like, obviously we're kind of known for as a school that focuses on creating your own products, with tools like scanning and 3D printing and so on. So how do you feel that's changing the landscape for modelers, 3D modelers?
Oh, I think it's the next logical step. I mean, because as 3D modelers, we have this digital object that we've worked on, but it's almost like it's there, but it's not really there. So for a technology to emerge where modelers are now able to realize their ZBrush creations as full objects, I think is an awesome thing, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for for digital for modelers in terms of selling the product and adding a lot of value in their work that way. So I think it's one of the best things to happen for digital modeling since ZBrush.
Yeah. No, yeah. Actually, I've noticed that the modelers are getting into 3D printing. It's almost like having like a separate portfolio that brings a variety to your, you know, to the portfolio. It's, instead of having just one medium, you could take the work you've already done on the computer, and then you could kind of expand on it, and now I have two types of mediums and ways of presenting your work, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because you can also have, say, this particular creature on the screen. You can have, a game. This could be a game asset that's fully animatable, and a V-Ray render or a Moto render for my portfolio, and also a 3D printed piece. So it hits many birds with one stone. Just I've built the asset. It can branch off into these many different um, things. So which
Yeah.
is a great thing.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So you were going to show us some like a quick demo.
Yeah, but I figured I'd show sort of my process. I've always talked about starting from a sphere. So I'll show how I pull out a bust of a creature, I guess, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure that our audience will love it.
So pretty much whenever I start on something after a tiring day at work, and I feel that urge to just open up ZBrush, I always start with a ball, a sphere. Let's turn this into a polymesh 3D here. So starting from a sphere, let's pretty much go through the some of the tools that I always use. So move tool is a very important one for me because it acts as the equivalent of your hand pushing and pulling clay broadly, before using any tools. So with move, I typically have it set to a low intensity. I like working that way because it gives me more feedback as opposed to, I believe the default is I don't know, around 40, kind of gives it sort of like a gelatinous. It's like working with wet clay, for example, or something a lot harder to control. So with a sphere, let's try and pull something out here. And I didn't have anything uh, pre-planned or pre-designed, which most of the time I like working that way because I like the feeling of just you know pushing and pulling this thing into something that I didn't really plan on doing, and a lot of times I get a lot of sort of happy surprises that way. So I'm just without putting much thought into it, we're just trying to pull the form of a head here with a shoulder. So I'm thinking let's do something uh, like monstrous or demonic. Those are always fun. So obviously the topology is going to be on the messy side if you do that. So I rely a lot on the Dynamesh. So Dynamesh this, get a better topology. One tool that I also like to use is the dam standard, also set on a low setting. And what I like to use this for is I like to use it as both a subtractive meaning this, and also an additive meaning this. So I'm using it, and also if you notice, I'm using it as a tool to create broad marks as opposed to a detailing tool, which is what I often see people use with this brush. I use it for that too, but since I'm more in love with bigger forms, I tend to use this as a sort of like a tool for broad strokes. So I'm just kind of just quickly roughing in some semblance of the planes of the face here. We're not going to get too technical on facial anatomy and all that stuff, but pull out an ear here. Just the move tool using the Alt key pushes it out of the normal. Let's try and I'm just trying to move fast here because again, we don't have much time. So I figured something a little on the ogre-ish kind of side. I'm just roughly and quickly blocking in features. Blocking the eye sockets here. So if you notice, I'm using the smooth tool a lot in conjunction with a lot of my my brushes here. It's because whenever I make my marks, I like to normalize it, and it just adds a really nice sort of gain of volume on the surface. So say I'm blocking in the brows here, smooth, nice organic form. So let's block in the maw here. Dam standard to just quickly block in the features here. Or maybe it'd be more interesting if this thing didn't have a nose. Maybe it's more of a ghoul than a giant, which was what I was intending to do. So let's subdivide this once. Move tool. Just trying to be a little bit more specific with the things I've blocked out. Maybe this guy can be sort of like a Frankenstein. I'm seeing sort of a squarish shape to his head, you know, sort of like a more cadaver-looking Frankenstein. That could be fun. So as you can see, this is sort of what I do each night when I decide to do a like a ZBrush mini project to kind of just unwind and try and exercise my imagination. So he's got sort of like an overbite there, or an underbite, I should say, and just blocking in the eyeballs. So clay buildup is really awesome. I used to kind of flip-flop between using this default alpha and alpha 48. For the longest time, I loved using alpha 48. As you can see, it has a really nice, it gives you a nice round form with nice edging. This looking at these edges here, it gives you a really nice definitive shape on top of the surface. And the thing I love about that is, for creating things like, say, the nasolabial fold here, all I have to do is one stroke. I'm getting a really nice crisp intersection point. So let's use it a little bit. Let's see. So the difference between using that and the alpha 48, alpha 48, or sorry, what is this? Alpha 28 is a lot less subtle. You're getting almost brush-like strokes if you use it correctly, which I love, because with this I'm able to define sort of like flowy marks on the surface. And it's also great for building up form this way. Like I'm running it across a cross section here, like the cylindrical shape, and using that with smooth, I'm already getting a really nice clean area here. So let's give him some teeth. Looks kind of sleepy. So I'm just quickly adding forms here. Now, if I were doing this with more time, I would be a lot more calculated and sort of the strokes that I would do. But there's a lot of fun in doing it quickly while in a rush too. So as you can see, again, I'm just applying the clay buildup in areas like, say, I just want to build up the jaw muscle here. I'm just running the cross section, smoothing it, and it's already giving us a nice form there. And then we go with the dam standard. Again, small intensity, and let's give it a big radius here for the draw size. And just sort of reinforcing and popping out the forms that I've laid out with the clay buildup. Just adding more complexity to this by bringing out those shapes, and also adding some planes to the forms, like say this jaw muscle that I've earlier on placed. I'm just accenting it with the dam standard and then smoothing it. So now the pop of that can be seen from afar. So a lot of sculpture modeling is the play of light on the surface, and so you have to kind of determine the main landmarks of the face and make sure that the read from close up to medium to far is present. I mean, right now he's still a little not quite as fleshed out, but that's why I would oftentimes zoom out. I want to make sure that all the forms that I've laid out are readable from afar. So let's just pull out the teeth some more. So I'm just getting in there and popping out the eyes here. So we won't touch much on the back here since we won't have enough time. But I'd like to still put in the muscles here, the sternocleidomastoid. So I'm also using the clay buildup as a subtractive tool as well as an additive tool. It's really great for that. So a lot of times it's just once I have most of the forms laid out, it's just having fun with them and figuring out ways to subdivide them. And when I say subdivide, I don't mean adding resolution on the mesh, but rather um, subdividing this area, let's say, into a series of smaller forms that complement that area and not take away from it, not take away from the read. When I zoom out, for me, the most important thing is when I zoom out, the bigger areas are still visible, even though I'm adding a series of more complex, more granular forms uh, on top of them. Like say, for example, let's subdivide this maw here. A lot of it is just having fun with the the model. I'm not really thinking of accuracy right now. It's just whatever will give me a good creature, like a hopefully one with character and personality. So it's not taking itself too seriously here. I mean, we are doing creatures. To take it too seriously would take the fun out of it. It's a lot of times when I'm working on both at work and my personal work, I really have fun with it. It's a rare opportunity to to be able to, for me personally, to be able to just zone out and try and create something that I love to create. Uh, I love the fact that I'm able to work on a software that allows me to create creatures, something I've always wanted ever since I was a kid, and to also work in a profession that allows me to do that. So I think if you carry that fun and love for what it is that you're doing and your models, it may sound corny, but it'll always uh, give you joy and hopefully give other people a lot of joy in watching you share it on Facebook or your blog or whatever that may be. So, I mean, there's still a lot we could do with this. I mean, um, so once I get to this point, there's skin stretching we can do. There's pore work. There's detail. Wrinkling. But before going to those smaller, into that sort of smaller form work, I just really make sure that all the big forms are in order. So I will mostly stick around in this general phase of work for quite a long period of time. The majority of the time, I would say. I would just say take what's here and really work it. Now that I have sort of the general sort of gesture of what this character is, now the real work begins. Just kind of, not worrying about, poor detail. I'm not going to worry about that at all until near the last part of the process, but rather I would say focus on right here, just below the lower lip, and just kind of try and figure out how to make that look interesting. I've seen enough ogres with underbites and this big thing kind of over the chin, and I've done that in many times with my own work. So I always try to figure out, okay, what can I bring that's new here? And in most cases, I revert back to the familiar, to what I know how to do best, but I still try and make sure that it's a well done, that my execution is the best that I can make it, and that it adds to the uh, the creature. Oops, let's just let this thing save. So there's still a lot of things to do in this. Focusing on the individual main areas of the creature, and just spending a lot of time fleshing out the form. It's something I'll definitely touch on during the class in much greater detail. But so this is just a very quick preview of what I'll be touching on during the class. Uh, there's a lot more work to be done for this one, but yeah. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in class.
Yeah, thank you, Gio. That was an amazing demo, and I know I'm certainly very excited to see your class. I know a lot of our audiences is as well. It's a rare opportunity because this is your first time teaching online, right? From what I know.
Yeah, I mean, I did your
The
workshop
workshop.
before, and some smaller talks. But yeah, it's my uh, first time teaching at a length for many weeks.
Yeah, so we're definitely in for a treat, guys, because Gio's first online debut teaching, so it's going to be exciting. I know a lot of people have been asking to learn from Gio for many years now. So finally, we have the chance here at Mol3D, and We're going to be opening up registration for Gio's class one day early. So you guys who made it to the open house will have a chance to get in on this Sunday. And then, of course, on August 31st, we'll be opening up registration. For that first week, for you guys that don't know, it's our introductory week. We're going to have a reduced price, like an introductory price. And if you haven't gotten on the waiting list, make sure to do so so you could get best chance of trying to get into the class. So really excited to see you guys this semester. It's going to be super fun. And Gio, thanks again for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time.
No, no. Again, thanks for having me.
All right, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.